Number 10, what if Miles Morales became Thor? By Odin's Fade is a line that'll live in Marvel infamy, and it tells you everything you need to know about this cosmic misfire. The What If series is supposed to be fun, a chance to see your favorite heroes in absurd new roles. But the idea of what if Miles Morales became Thor landed with a thud louder than Mjolnir hitting a pile of cliche. When Miles Morales, your beloved black and Puerto Rican character from Brooklyn, was chosen to wield the hammer, we all expected an exciting new take on the Thunder God. But what we got was a staggering display of editorial's tone deafness. One that proved that diversity for diversity's sake, without cultural sensitivity, could fall flat on its face. It all went wrong the moment the creative team decided that this Asgard should look less like a mythical golden realm and more like a shallow stereotypical depiction of an inner city neighborhood. You know, kind of place where sneakers are inexplicably hanging over powered lines, which is a visual shorthand in media often associated with unsavory activities. What makes it even worse is the dialogue. Miles Thor is forced to speak in a barrage of slang that sounds completely unnatural and performative, accumulating in what I previously said at the start of this video, by Odin's Fade. This was the creative peak of the issue, apparently. On top of that, the sacred hammer of Thor, which is a mythological artifact of immense power and dignity, was defaced with graffiti, basically reducing it to a street prop. To me, and many comic fans, the whole thing was relying on a surface-level, monolithic view of black culture, treating it like a costume you could simply put on and take off. Instead of a fresh, heroic reinterpretation, the comic felt like a minstrel show of lazy stereotypes. What I think makes it even crazier is that the backlash was so immediate and severe that Marvel was forced to issue a formal apology, acknowledging that the execution missed the mark and failed to respect the community it was trying to represent. It was an embarrassing demonstration that real diversity requires nuance, not just swapping a white hero for a non-white one and slathering the setting with cheap visual tropes. I guess sometimes the answer to what if is simply, how about no? The Black Punisher. Imagine the Punisher, Frank Castle, needing a disguise, and his first thought isn't, I should grow a beard, but I should probably change my race. That's the bizarre and deeply offensive premise of The Punisher number 59 to number 62. In the early 90s, when comics were trying too hard to be grim and gritty, this storyline took a hard turn into the utterly ridiculous. Frank Castle is on the run from the Kingpin, and a rogue drug-addicted surgeon offers him a solution, which is a surgical procedure that alters his appearance, including his skin pigmentation. Oh boy, it's not going to end well, is it? Frank agrees to be temporarily turned into a black man, solely to use a new face as a camouflage to hide in the urban environment of Chicago. What makes it even worse is the utter trivialization of race. Frank's new identity is treated purely as a spy movie plot device, like a means to experience the other side of the Law and Order spectrum before conveniently reverting to being white. He even teams up with Luke Cage, leading to awkward interactions where the narrative attempts to tackle racial tension, but ends up feeling clumsy and exploitative. Frank's internal monologues and the way other characters react to him lean on outdated and uncomfortable tropes. This story essentially boils down to a blackface storyline, played completely straight, where the white vigilante gets to shed the skin and the societal oppression that comes with it without any lasting consequence or deeper understanding. It reduced racial identity to a temporary plot device for a white hero's convenience, completely lacking the sensitivity required to handle such a transformation in a meaningful way. The writers might have intended to show Frank's dedication to his mission, but the execution was simply tone deaf, cementing this arc as one of the most embarrassing missteps in its history. So yeah, when you need a disguise, maybe stick to a simple pair of glasses and a fake mustache. It's far less problematic. Number 8, She-Hulk's moment with Juggernaut. The only explanation for this issue is that writer Chuck Austen must have lost a dare. During his controversial run on Uncanny X-Men, Austen often veered into character-damaging soap opera theatrics, and no moment was more erogenous than the confirmation that She-Hulk, Jennifer Walters, had slept with the Juggernaut, Kane Marco. The story starts when She-Hulk is brought in as the legal consultant for the Juggernaut, who is, let's not forget, a violent career criminal who has repeatedly tried to murder her cousin, Bruce Banner, also known as the Hulk. Yet, the narrative frames their relationship as one of immediate, uncontrollable sexual tension. In issue number 435, the inevitable happens. Jennifer Walters is an intelligent, high-powered lawyer and a superhero with dignity, but this storyline reduced her character to a walking size queen trope. The implication is that she was driven purely by a desire for someone physically imposing, regardless of his morality, intelligence, or a long history of mass destruction. Which is crazy, because for me, it was a massive character assassination that stripped her of her agency and judgment for the sake of a cheap, shock value hookup. On top of that, it made the brilliant She-Hulk look like a complete idiot for getting intimate with a simple brute who had terrorized her friends and family for decades. The fan backlash was so intense that another writer, Dan Slott, took over the She-Hulk solo title soon after and immediately instituted a hard retcon just to erase it. Slott revealed that the She-Hulk who slept with Juggernaut was actually a runaway life model decoy, an android double from another dimension. The fact that a future writer felt compelled to use the classic "it was a robot" clone device to scrub this event from continuity speaks volumes about how inappropriate and out of character the original moment was. In the end, it turns out that even in the Marvel Universe, if a storyline's bad enough, you could just blame it on the malfunctioning android. Number 7. Aunt May's Teenage Scandal. A steamy, bizarre attempt to sexualize the wholesome parents of the Spider-Man mythos, Trouble is the comic Marvel would like to pretend never happened. This limited series was marketed as the secret origin of Spider-Man, but it was truly a secret that nobody ever asked for. The story focuses on teenagers May, Ben, Richard, and Mary, who would eventually become Aunt May, Uncle Ben, and Peter Parker's parents. The inappropriateness starts right away, with covers featuring real teenagers, models in bikinis, setting an exploitative Archie comics gone wrong tone that felt wrong from the jump. What makes it even worse is the storyline itself. It completely undermines the core tragedy of Peter Parker's origin story, that he was an orphan taken in by his loving aunt and uncle, by turning it into a convoluted teenage pregnancy scandal. The plot reveals that the young May was the wild child who had a fling with Richard Parker, who's Peter's eventual father. The story implies that May actually became pregnant by Richard, secretly gave birth to Peter Parker, and then handed the baby over to Mary, who was infertile, to raise as her own. Like, what? This would mean that Aunt May is actually Peter's biological mother, and Uncle Ben, who is depicted as sterile, is not his blood relative at all. This melodrama felt disrespectful to the characters, whose entire appeal lies in their traditional stability, kindness, and decency. The characterization of a young, promiscuous May and a sterile Ben completely corrupted the legacy of the characters, who taught Spider-Man that with great power comes great responsibility. This series was so universally disliked that Marvel immediately distanced itself from it, never referencing the plot points again and tactically declaring the entire series non-canon. In the end, it was a secret origin that was best left in the vault, right next to all the bad fan fiction. Number 6. Spider-Man's Radioactive Fluids. If there's a Spider-Man comic that proves there is such a thing as too mature for superheroes, it is Spider-Man Reign, a dystopian future where intimacy is literally deadly. Written and drawn by Kara Andrews, the series was intended to be Spider-Man's version of the gritty classic The Dark Knight Returns. While the art direction was certainly moody, the narrative made a spectacular error in its attempt to be shocking. In issue number 3, an elderly retired Peter Parker visits the grave of Mary Jane Watson and finally explains the cause of her death. What he reveals is a concept that I genuinely think is simultaneously grotesque, clinically depressing, and unintentionally hilarious. Mary Jane died of cancer caused by prolonged exposure to Peter's radioactive body fluids during their intimate life as husband and wife. Specifically, Peter delivers a monologue where he says, "Loving me killed you, like a spider crawling up inside your body and laying 1,000 eggs of cancer. I killed you." This might be peak poetry. The clear implication is that Peter Parker's semen was radioactive and slowly poisoned the love of his life. What makes it even worse is that it takes the fantasy logic of superheroes of radioactive spider bite equals powers and applies a real-world horrifying biological consequence in the most uncomfortable way possible. The plot point is highly inappropriate because it turns the death of a beloved character into a weird body horror footnote, and it essentially punishes the characters for their love and physical intimacy. The image of Spider-Man inadvertently killing his wife through sex was too much for most readers, completely shattering the suspension of disbelief and replacing the story's intended emotional weight with sheer cringe. Instead of a tragic hero, Peter Parker becomes a walking biohazard. The old superhero motto now becomes, with great power comes the immediate need to use a lead-lined prophylactic. Number 5, Ruins. Ruins is the comic equivalent of a bad day when you run over your dog, get fired, and then a meteor strikes your house, all while your favorite characters are screaming in pain. This 2-issue series, written by Warren Ellis, is a nihilistic parody of Kurt Busiek's acclaimed Marvels. While Marvels looked at the Marvel Universe with a sense of wonder, Ruins approached it with cynicism and utter disgust. The premise is simple. What if everything went right and the Marvel Universe actually went horrifically wrong? In this world, Murphy's Law is absolute, and the accidents that gave heroes their powers instead result in horrific deformities, cancer, and death, which I genuinely think is the best case scenario. The comic's ranked as inappropriate due to its relentless stomach-churning imaginary, truly mean-spirited tone. It features scenes such as the Hulk not becoming a strong giant, but a pulsating, exploding pile of green tumors. Quicksilver's metabolism so fast that his body literally tears itself apart. Jean Grey is a prostitute who died at the hands of Nick Fury. On top of that, the Avengers are not heroes, but a group of revolutionaries who are simply shot to death by the US government. Perhaps what I think is most disturbing visual is of a young Peter Parker who, after being bitten by a radioactive spider, does not gain powers, but instead develops a highly infectious, flesh-eating virus. The comic ends with him shivering and literally rotting away. Ruins cross the line from a dark alternate reality to what I call misery porn. It offers no hope, no redemption, and no story beyond the brutal, sustained suffering of the icons we love. If you ever wanted to see a comic where everyone's miserable and dies horribly, well then, you probably need a therapist, but this is the comic for you. Number 4, The Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver Incest. This comic proved that edgy is not always good and that sometimes subtext is best left as subtext. The Ultimate Universe was created to be a modern, grounded, and edgy update to classic Marvel lore. But under writer Joseph Loeb, the Ultimates 3 took that mandate to an extremely uncomfortable place. The relationship between Pietro, aka Quicksilver, and Wanda Maximoff, aka the Scarlet Witch, had always had a subtle undertone of being too close in the Ultimate line, but previous writers kept it ambiguous enough to be dismissed. In the Ultimates 3, the subtext become blatant, horrifying text. The siblings are explicitly depicted in a romantic, incestuous relationship. In the very first issue, they're shown in an intimate embrace, and the dialogue throughout the series consistently reinforced their sexual bond. What makes it even worse is how the rest of the Ultimates team reacts. Other characters are completely aware of the incest and treat it with a mix of disgust and voyeurism, which does not help the readers at all. There is a specific line where Wolverine, who might be the twins' biological father in this universe, casually comments on having watched them have sex from the bushes. Like, huh? This deeply gross detail serves no narrative purpose other than to shock us readers and add another layer of unnecessary trauma to the story. For me, the inappropriateness is multifaceted. It normalizes incest among heroes. It utilizes sexual taboo purely for sales buzz. And it completely degrades the characters involved. Wanda and Pietro are reduced solely to their illicit relationship, stripping away their competence as heroes. The storyline was so reviled that it was often cited as the definitive turning point in the Ultimate Universe's decline, marking a shift from grounded realism to what I call a kind of tasteless juvenile shock value. This series was so bad, it made the entire Ultimate Universe want to file for divorce and move to an alternate reality. Number 3, West Coast Avengers Victim Blaming. The only thing more inappropriate than the assault written into this story is the absolute moral bankruptcy of the heroes in their reaction to it. This storyline, titled Lost in Spacetime, sees the West Coast Avengers transported back to the Old West. While there, Mockingbird is kidnapped by the villainous Phantom Rider. He uses potions and drugs to remove her free will, forcing her to believe she is in love with him. During this period, he sexually assaults her repeatedly under the guise of this fabricated romance. But the real controversy lies in the utterly atrocious resolution. When the potion wears off and Mockingbird realizes she's been repeatedly raped, she fights the Phantom Rider on a cliff edge. As he clings to the cliff, begging for help, she refuses to lift him up, letting him fall to his death, which I think should be a good ending. But it all goes wrong the moment we see the subsequent reaction of her heroic teammates, specifically her husband, Hawkeye. Instead of comforting their traumatized teammate and wife, they condemn her. Hawkeye immediately breaks up with her, and the team essentially court-martials her for violating their sacred no-kill code. The narrative framing is deeply inappropriate because it positions the victim of sexual assault as the villain for not saving her grapist. How crazy is that? I think the writers showed a complete failure to understand the gravity of the trauma they had written, treating the drugging and grape as a minor plot point compared to the crime of letting a villain die. It is a textbook example of victim blaming, where the strict moral dogma of the heroes overrides any sense of basic human empathy for a trauma survivor. It took decades for Marvel to finally address this, eventually having characters acknowledge that Bobby was treated unfairly. Because apparently the no-kill rule only applies when the person you're considering killing is not the one who drugged and violated you repeatedly. Number 2, Gwen Stacy's secret affair. Sins Past is the storyline that proved the true villain of Spider-Man was not the Green Goblin, but the Marvel editorial team that approved this mess. This story arc is frequently cited as the single worst retcon in the character's history, a plot that required readers to suspend their disbelief, then actively try to forget it existed. The shocking reveal is that, before her tragic death, Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first true love and a symbol of innocence, had a secret affair with his archenemy, Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. This affair resulted in a secret pregnancy, and Gwen gave birth to rapidly aging twins Gabriel and Sarah in Europe. What's worse is that these children return as adults with a murderous agenda to kill Peter Parker. The inappropriateness of this story is hard to overstate. It fundamentally betrays Gwen Stacy's character, transforming her from a loyal, wholesome partner into someone who slept with her boyfriend's worst enemy, who is also the father of her best friend, Harry Osborn. Not only that, the age dynamic is also deeply disturbing. Norman Osborn is a middle-aged man, while Gwen was a college student, adding a predatory layer to the affair that the comic treats as a consensual lapse in judgment. The writer, J. Michael Straczynski, originally intended for the children to be Peter's, which would have been controversial but at least logical. However, editorial mandates forbade Peter from having adult children to keep him youthful, forcing the pivot to Norman Osborn. The result is a story that feels dirty and disrespectful to the legacy of a deceased character. It adds nothing to the mythos but cheap shock value, which requires readers to accept that Gwen hid a full-term pregnancy from Peter while they were dating. It was so universally hated that Marvel was eventually forced to retcon it out of existence nearly 17 years later. It's classic Marvel retcon all over again. When you want to save a dead character's reputation, just say a mad clone of their boyfriend's best friend messed with their mind, which is a completely normal comic book explanation. Number 1, Carol Danvers' Grape. This is not just a comic book. It is a masterclass in how to completely fail a beloved character and then celebrate the failure. Topping the list is Avengers number 200, an issue that I think should be taught in comic book history classes as a catastrophic failure of editorial and creative responsibility regarding sexual assault. In this milestone issue, Miss Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, suddenly becomes explicitly pregnant. What makes it even crazier is that the pregnancy accelerates at an impossible rate, and within a few days, she gives birth to a boy. The child grows into a full adult man named Marcus within hours. Marcus then reveals the terrifying truth. He is the son of Immortus, who was trapped in a dimension called Limbo. To escape, he sent his essence into our world, possessed Carol, impregnated her, and was essentially born as his own father. The horror of the plot is that Marcus flat out admits to using mind control to seduce Carol and impregnate her, which is by definition grape. On top of that, the Avengers, Earth's mightiest heroes, included Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, do not recognize this as a crime or an assault. Instead, they treat the entire bizarre event as a romantic fairy tale. When Marcus announces he is taking Carol back to Limbo to live with him, the Avengers literally smile, congratulate her on her happy ending, and let her leave with her abuser. Carol, still under the lingering effects of Marcus's influence, agrees to go. the inappropriateness of the total disconnect between the horrifying events of incestuous self-impregnation via mind control and the celebratory tone-deaf final page when the heroes act as if this is a joyous occasion. The fan backlash was so severe that writer Chris Claremont, who had previously written Miss Marvel, was forced to return to the character in Avengers Annual number 10, where he verbally eviscerated the plot in number 200. In that annual, he had Carol return and angrily confront the entire Avengers team, explicitly telling them they failed her and allowed her to be kidnapped and violated. In the end, the Avengers are great at stopping Ultron, but absolutely terrible at recognizing a blatant instance of sexual assault and kidnapping. Well, that's it for this one. If you liked the video, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and ring the bell so you never miss a drop. Craving more stories from comics, movies, and beyond? Check out this video right here. Cheers and see you in the next one.